Brad Pitt just gave an interview that quietly turned three major stories about his life into one uncomfortable picture. He revealed that after 7 years of sobriety, he is drinking again. He opened up about a period when his emotional pain became so intense that he understood why someone might feel there was no way out. And he confirmed, without directly addressing the headlines, that his relationship with his children has become deeply fractured. But this wasn't a story that leaked from a private conversation. Pitt chose to say these things himself, on the record, in his own words. And once you look at everything he revealed together, the real story becomes much bigger than alcohol. So why did he decide to talk about it now? For years, Brad Pitt carefully built a very different public image. He was the actor who had gotten sober. He was the man who openly acknowledged that he needed help and found support through Alcoholics Anonymous. He was also the man who publicly thanked Bradley Cooper for helping him get there. At the National Board of Review Awards in 2020, while accepting an award for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Pitt looked directly at Cooper and credited him with helping him become sober. He even said that every day since had been happier. It was an unusually personal moment for a Hollywood star. And for years, that moment became part of the story people told about Pitt's recovery. But now, that story has changed. And the way he revealed it makes the change even more surprising. In a new Esquire cover interview, Pitt confirmed that he is drinking again after 7 years without alcohol. He did not describe it as throwing away everything he had learned. Instead, he said he eased back into drinking in a controlled way. He admitted that he became overconfident a couple of times and had to recognize when things were no longer working for him. Today, he says he can have a few glasses of wine, but not much more. And he emphasized that he still has to be disciplined. That's an important distinction. He isn't pretending his past never happened. He isn't claiming alcohol was never a problem. In fact, he seems very aware that it can become one again. So what does it mean when someone who spent 7 years sober decides to test those boundaries? Even the setting of the interview carried a strange sense of irony. Journalist Ryan D'Agostino sat down with Pitt for the conversation, and at one point Pitt reportedly offered him a glass of wine. Given what they were discussing, it was almost impossible not to notice the symbolism. Pitt is now 62, and he described himself as something of a natural optimist. That optimism, he suggested, has helped him survive some of the hardest periods of his life. But optimism can have another side. Sometimes it can convince you that you are ready for something before you really are. Pitt appears to understand that about himself now. And that makes his admission feel less like a celebrity confession and more like a man admitting that recovery is rarely a straight line. The reason his sobriety mattered so much becomes clearer when you look back at what was happening when he first stopped drinking. Pitt's recovery began after his separation from Angelina Jolie, during one of the most difficult periods of his adult life. In a 2019 interview with the New York Times, he said he had spent roughly a year and a half attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings after the split. He didn't describe those meetings as a publicity exercise. He described them as something meaningful. Earlier this year, he spoke about them again on Dax Shepard's Armchair Expert podcast. He remembered men sitting together, talking honestly about mistakes, struggles, desires, and failures, while still finding room for humor. It sounded like a place where he could finally stop performing. But there was another detail about his recovery story that makes the current moment even more interesting. Brad Pitt's gratitude toward Bradley Cooper was not just a random Hollywood friendship story. Cooper himself has been sober since 2004 and has spoken about the person who helped him change his life, actor Will Arnett. In a strange chain of support, one actor helped another, who later helped Pitt. Recovery passed from one person to the next. That makes Pitt's decision to drink again feel more complicated than simply saying he has gone back to an old habit. He once found a structure that genuinely helped him. He built part of his public identity around what that structure gave him. And now he is saying that he has stepped away from it, at least partly. But the most difficult part of the interview wasn't about alcohol at all. Buried inside the same conversation was a much darker admission. Pitt talked about a period in his life connected to what he called family matters. He described the emotional pain during that period as overwhelming. He said it was the closest he had come to a truly dangerous emotional place. He was careful about what he meant. Some reports framed his comments slightly differently, with Pitt making clear that he had never actually been in that darkest clinical state while still admitting that he understood how someone could be drawn toward it when the pain became unbearable. Either way, the message was clear. There was a period when life hurt badly enough for him to understand why a person might stop seeing a way forward. But when the interviewer asked what had caused it, Pitt refused to give the full story. He simply said it involved family. He didn't name anyone. He didn't explain the specific events. And that restraint may be one of the most revealing parts of the entire interview. Pitt has spent decades being asked personal questions. He knows exactly how quickly a single sentence can become a headline. He also knows how easily a private family conflict can become entertainment once it enters the public conversation. Yet this time, he chose to reveal just enough to acknowledge the pain, and then he stopped. Why would someone who has spent so many years protecting his private life suddenly allow even that much through? One answer may be grief. Pitt's mother, Jane Pitt, died in August 2025. Her death came during a period when several difficult family issues were already weighing on him. Pitt has spoken over the years about growing up in Springfield, Missouri, in a close-knit Midwestern family. His childhood and his parents have often represented the life he had before Hollywood transformed everything around him. Losing his mother meant losing one of the strongest links to that earlier version of himself. And while grieving her, he was also dealing with another kind of family loss involving his own children. The past and the present were pulling away from him at the same time. But there was one more detail about his parents that made the interview especially poignant. Pitt said he now checks in with his father regularly. It was a small detail, but it carried a lot of weight. He also made a blunt observation that it might be better to be the parent who dies first. There was no polished Hollywood language around it. No dramatic speech. Just a man thinking about what it means to lose one parent and eventually face losing the other. Grief may explain part of the darkness he described. But he used the words, family stuff, not one isolated event. And anyone who has followed Pitt's life over the past decade knows that his family story is far more complicated than the loss of a parent. Because there is another family fracture that has been unfolding in public for years. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie have been legally single since 2019. Yet their divorce still isn't completely finished in every practical sense. In 2019, a court granted what is known as a bifurcated judgment. That meant they were legally divorced, while other issues involving their separation remained unresolved. Their 6 children, property, finances, and other disputes kept the legal relationship alive long after the marriage itself had ended. And the origins of that collapse go back even further, to a private flight in September 2016. Jolie filed for divorce shortly after that flight, requesting sole custody of their 6 children. Years later, a heavily redacted FBI report connected to the incident became public. It contained allegations from Jolie describing physical and verbal aggression during the flight involving Pitt and the children. Pitt was investigated by Los Angeles County's child welfare authorities. He was cleared, and no criminal charges were filed against him. But being cleared legally did not make the story disappear. It continued to shape the public conversation around their family, while the private legal conflict continued in other forms. And eventually, even after custody issues became less central, another enormous battle took over. That battle involved Chateau Miraval, the French winery that Pitt and Jolie purchased together in 2008. The property later became the setting for their wedding in 2014, when it represented one of the happiest moments in their relationship. After the marriage collapsed, it became something very different. Pitt sued Jolie over the sale of her share in the property to Russian businessman Yuri Shefler, arguing that she had sold it without his consent. What had once symbolized their marriage became one of the most bitter remaining points of conflict between them. Imagine carrying that kind of unresolved history for nearly a decade. Now add grief, public scrutiny, and children growing into adults who are making their own decisions about their relationship with you. And that's where the story becomes even more painful. 4 of Pitt and Jolie's 6 children have taken steps to distance themselves from the Pitt name. The changes happened gradually, and not all of them took the same form. In 2022, Zahara publicly introduced herself as Zahara Marley Jolie when joining her sorority at Spelman College. She did not file a legal petition at the time. She simply stopped using Pitt publicly. Then, in 2024, Vivian appeared as Vivian Jolie in the playbill for a Broadway production she worked on with her mother. Again, the change was public, but not necessarily the same kind of formal legal action. Then Shiloh took a more direct step. On her 18th birthday, Shiloh filed a legal petition to remove Pitt from her name. She hired her own lawyer to handle the process independently. Her attorney later described the decision as an important personal choice by a young adult dealing with painful circumstances in her life. The court approved the petition, and Shiloh Nouvelle Jolie became her legal name. That alone would have been a major development in the family's story. But it wasn't the end. Because 2 more children have now taken steps that could make the pattern impossible to dismiss as isolated choices. Pitt and Jolie's 6 children are Maddox, Pax, Zahara, Shiloh, Knox, and Vivian. So far, Pax and Knox have not publicly or legally taken the same step away from the Pitt name. That doesn't necessarily tell us why. Their relationships with their father are private, and there could be many reasons for the difference. Knox is also younger than some of his siblings. What matters is that the family fracture has not affected all 6 children in exactly the same way. Still, the fact that 4 have now moved away from the name is impossible to ignore. And the latest developments make the timing of Pitt's interview especially striking. Just weeks before the Esquire interview was published, both Maddox and Zahara reportedly filed formal petitions asking to have Pitt legally removed from their names. The paperwork cited personal reasons. That means 4 of the 6 children have now either legally changed their names or publicly dropped Pitt from them. Only 2 have not taken that step. Pitt did not directly discuss those filings in the interview. He didn't have to. The timing speaks for itself. While he was sitting down to talk about sobriety, grief, family pain, and the hardest period of his life, 2 of his children were moving through the legal system to remove his name from theirs. So what was this interview really telling us?